Some things are buried for a reason. But what if they don't stay buried? Vincent Hale wasn't the kind of man you expected to see in a roadside diner. He wore his wealth like a second skin. Tailored charcoal coat, custom leather shoes, watch that ticked louder than the rain tapping on the windows. Every movement was precise, controlled, calculated. But that morning, as he pushed open the foggy glass door of Maggie's diner with a grumble, something about him looked off. Maybe it was the slight tremor in his right hand. Maybe it was the way he paused longer than usual at the specials board, like he couldn't read the words through the weight on his chest. Or maybe it was the girl, the waitress who would change everything, that drew his attention first. She couldn't have been more than 17. Dark skin, curls tucked under a red bandana, wiping down a table with a rhythm that said she'd done this 1,000 times. She glanced at him, smiled politely. Nothing more. He didn't smile back. Vincent sat at the corner booth, far from the windows, away from the noise. It was always the same. Black coffee, egg whites, toast, dry. He didn't come here for the food, just routine. Routine was safe, predictable, but not today. Not when his chest suddenly clenched like a vice, breath caught in his throat. Not when he reached for the edge of the table and missed. The coffee cup shattered before he did. His body hit the floor with a thud. Time froze. The kitchen staff screamed. But the girl, the waitress, she didn't. She ran to him. No hesitation. No fear. She turned him on his side, loosened his collar, checked his pulse like she'd done it before. "Sir? Hey, can you hear me?" she said, firm but gentle. He blinked once. Twice. Her face came into focus through the haze. And just before the world spun again, his eyes caught a glint of silver at her neck. A pendant. Small, simple, a silver maple leaf. He blacked out. He woke up hours later in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and regret. The nurse told him a young girl called 911, rode in the ambulance, even stayed until the doctors took over. Said she refused to give her last name. Said she didn't want money. "She just wanted to know if you were okay," the nurse added, almost disbelieving. Vincent stared at the ceiling. He didn't understand. Why would a stranger go that far? And why did that damn necklace make his heart race harder than the fall ever did? It couldn't be. It was buried 17 years ago, with his daughter. He had it engraved himself, placed it in the casket with trembling hands. So what the hell was it doing around the neck of a teenage waitress at a roadside diner? He didn't have answers, but he knew one thing. He was going back to that diner, back to the girl, because sometimes what you try to bury finds a way to come back. She had no idea who he was. He had no idea what she carried. What happens when bloodlines return from the shadows and force the truth to be seen? If you found a necklace that was meant to stay underground, would you question everything you believe? She was just the girl who brought coffee, but the way she carried herself, it told a story no resume ever could. Maggie's diner wasn't the kind of place that made headlines. The booths were ripped in places, the coffee came burnt more often than not, and the jukebox only played 3 songs, all scratched. But people came back, not for the food, but for the people. And lately they came for her. Arielle, 17, high school senior, working the breakfast shift to help her aunt pay rent. Smart, sharp, and kind in a way that made customers tip even when their wallets said they shouldn't. She knew the regulars by name, remembered how old man Clyde liked his bacon, burnt like charcoal, and how Miss Lorna wanted her creamer warmed before pouring it in. But she wasn't just polite. She was present, like she was carrying something inside her she couldn't quite name, but refused to let it harden her. And that morning, the one where a man collapsed right in front of the soda machine, she didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She moved like someone who'd done it before, even though she hadn't. Back in the kitchen, after the ambulance had taken him away, Maggie, the owner, slammed her palms on the prep counter. "You okay, baby?" Arielle nodded, but her hands were shaking. "You saved that man's life, you know that?" Maggie said, pushing a glass of water into her hand. "You didn't panic. That was real grace under pressure." Arielle just shrugged. "I've read a lot of medical books," she said quietly. "And my mom used to faint sometimes. I got used to reacting." Maggie's smile softened. "You ever think about med school?" Arielle nodded faintly. "Every day, but dreams like that don't come cheap." That night, Arielle sat on her twin mattress, flipping through a worn photo album, one she'd looked at hundreds of times. Every picture of her mother was faded, grainy, always half-lit or cut off at the edge of someone else's smile. There were no pictures of her father. He died when she was a baby. Her mom passed a year later after a long illness. She was raised by her aunt in a modest 2-bedroom, where the hot water barely lasted a full shower and the living room doubled as a study space. But through it all, she held on to one thing like it was sacred, the silver maple leaf necklace. It had always been her mother's. Or at least that's what her aunt told her. She never took it off, never questioned it. Until now. 2 days later, she noticed him again. Vincent Hale. Back in the diner. Same coat, same shoes, same cold expression. But this time, he didn't order. He just sat at the same booth, watching. Arielle felt it before she saw it. That tingle between her shoulder blades. That feeling of being observed not like a person, but like a puzzle. "Can I get you something?" she asked, polite as ever. He looked at her, really looked, and said softly, "The necklace. Where did you get it?" Arielle blinked. Her fingers brushed over the silver leaf hanging at her chest. "It was my mother's," she said cautiously. "Why?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "No reason," he lied. But inside, something shattered. 17 years ago, he buried that exact necklace with his only daughter, engraved with her initials, hidden under white lilies and regret. Now it was hanging around the neck of a teenage girl who looked too much like her not to be connected. Same eyes, same quiet fire, same defiance that didn't need to raise its voice. He couldn't ask. Not yet. Not without proof. Not without opening wounds he spent years pretending were healed. But he knew what he had to do. That night, Vincent called an old name. Diane Weller, his former private investigator. The one he swore he'd never work with again. The one who found out about his daughter's relationship in the first place. Back when he still believed purity was more important than family. "Find out everything about a girl named Arielle," he said. Pause, and do it quietly. There are moments when a man looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize the reflection. For Vincent Hale, this was that moment. Because if Arielle was who he feared, or hoped, she wasn't just a waitress. She was his granddaughter, and the truth was coming for him, whether he was ready or not. If the truth lived in a necklace, would you dare to ask who put it around your neck? He buried the past with his own hands. But now the past wore an apron, smiled like his daughter, and called him Sir. It only took Diane Weller 36 hours. When she called back, her voice was lower than he remembered, gravelly with caution. "She's clean, good grades, school part-time, works double shifts, no record, no drugs, lives with her aunt in a small apartment on 18th and Mercer." Vincent's fingers tightened around the pen in his hand. Diane paused. "And Vincent, her name is Arielle Brooks." His blood ran cold. "Brooks?" he repeated. "Yes, but her birth certificate." A pause. "You'll want to see this yourself." She sent the file over. Vincent stared at the screen as the document loaded. Arielle Camille Brooks, born October 12th. Mother, Caroline Hale. Father, Jonathan Brooks. Status, mother deceased during childbirth. Father deceased 2 years later. Legal guardianship passed to maternal friend and caretaker, Laverne Washington. Vincent didn't breathe for a full 30 seconds. "Caroline, He hadn't said her name aloud in over a decade. It still burned like salt on open skin. She had defied him, refused to abandon the man she loved, refused to raise her child in secret, as he had begged her to do. And so he had cut her off, cut her out of the will, out of the family, out of his life. She had died in labor, and he had blamed her for it. And now, here was the child, not just alive, here, real, and wearing the necklace he thought had turned to dust in the ground. He sat in silence for hours that night, whiskey untouched, phone silent, monitor glowing faintly with a paused video, security footage from Maggie's diner, showing a girl laughing as she carried plates to a crowded table. She looked like Caroline used to when she was 17, before the war started between them. Same stubborn jaw, same glow in the smile, same quiet, steely way of carrying herself like the world owed her nothing. But she'd take it anyway. The next morning, Vincent didn't just go to the diner. He waited until Arielle was on break. She was sitting alone out back, near the dumpster, sipping iced tea from a mason jar and reading something on her phone. Vincent cleared his throat. She turned, startled, then quickly straightened up, polite again. "Mr. Hale, right? You okay? You're not dizzy again, are you?" He shook his head. "No, I'm fine." A pause. She offered a seat. He didn't take it. Instead, he looked at her necklace again. Closer now. The leaf was worn, edges dulled, but unmistakable. On the back, so faint he almost thought he imagined it, were the initials. C.H. Caroline Hale. His hand trembled. "Where did you say you got that?" he asked, voice thinner than before. She hesitated. "My aunt said it was my mom's. I never met her, though. She died when I was born." Vincent nodded slowly. His throat tightened. "And what was her name?" "Caroline. Caroline Brooks. But she wasn't married, so I guess, technically, just Caroline." Vincent looked away. His face went pale. "It was true, all of it. You okay, sir?" Arielle asked, watching him now with concern. He looked back at her. Really looked. The crease between her brows, the freckles along her nose, the calm, guarded warmth in her voice. All of it. Her. She wasn't a stranger. She was his blood. Vincent opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his chest like shards of broken memory. Instead, he turned, without another word, and walked away. Arielle watched him go, a frown forming. He hadn't said anything strange, but the way he looked at her, like she was something sacred and something cursed at the same time, it unsettled her, and for the first time since meeting him, she felt afraid, not for her safety, but for what she might learn if she asked too many questions. He wanted to tell her the truth, but truth doesn't walk in quietly. It kicks the doors open and demands to be seen. And Vincent Hale had spent 17 years locking those doors shut. What would you do if your past sat across from you, smiling with your daughter's eyes? Some truths don't shatter like glass. They rot slowly, inside the one who holds them. Vincent sat in his car with the door wide open, the cold wind slicing through his expensive wool coat like it was nothing. The necklace. The initials. The girl. Caroline. He hadn't said her name aloud in 17 years. Not once. Not at her funeral. Not in therapy. Not in the long, empty nights when guilt clawed at his chest like a wild animal. He had buried her with silence, with pride, with anger so deep it fossilized. And now, the child he swore would never exist was real. Not just real, beautiful, intelligent, brave, and working at a greasy spoon diner to help pay the bills. He'd wasted every year she could have known his name. Back at his penthouse, everything felt wrong. The marble counters, the empty whiskey glass, the city skyline he used to call power. It all meant nothing. His daughter died without ever hearing, "I'm sorry." And now this girl, his granddaughter, looked him in the eyes with kindness and had no idea he once tried to erase her from the world. The shame felt like drowning. That night, he opened a drawer he hadn't touched in over a decade. Caroline's letters, unsent, unopened, all returned to sender. He ran his fingers over the envelopes. Some still smelled faintly of her perfume. Sweet, floral, stubborn. He picked one, opened it. "Dad!" That one word tore through him more violently than any heart attack. Her handwriting was uneven, rushed. She must have written it after he told her to leave. After he said he couldn't support her choices. He had told himself she'd moved on, that she was fine, that she didn't want him at the hospital when the baby came. But this letter said otherwise. "I named her Arielle. She's got the most beautiful laugh, like sunlight, like yours when you used to read me bedtime stories." Vincent dropped the letter. Meanwhile, back at Maggie's, Arielle couldn't shake the feeling in her chest. She wiped the same counter 3 times. The air felt heavier. The man, Vincent Hale, had looked at her like he knew something. Not something bad, something terrifying. "Did he say anything weird to you?" Maggie asked, watching her closely. Arielle paused. "No, but the way he looked at me, it was like I reminded him of someone." "Maybe you do," Maggie said gently. That night, Arielle sat on the floor of her room, surrounded by old photos. Her aunt's voice echoed from years ago. "Your mom was brave, but your grandfather? He was a powerful man, and he didn't want you." It had always been a whisper, a shadow, a missing name. Arielle had never asked, but now she held the necklace in her hand, turning it over slowly. She noticed, for the first time, how precisely the initials were engraved. Sehoch. It felt deliberate, personal, custom, something a lover or a parent would commission. The next morning, she confronted her aunt over breakfast. "Auntie, can I ask you something?" Laverne didn't look up from her eggs. "About my mom. Who gave her this necklace?" Her aunt froze, fork mid-air. "I've worn it since I was 6, Arielle said quietly. "But I never asked. I think I'm old enough now." Laverne sighed. Long, heavy. "That necklace came from a man who never showed up, who chose silence over family." "Was he rich?" "He was powerful." "Was he white?" Another pause. Laverne looked at her finally, eyes tired, honest. "Yes, that was the crack. The first one. The one that made the questions flood in like water through a broken dam." Arielle didn't know what to do with this truth. Only that it came with eyes like hers, and a guilt that wouldn't let her breathe. What would you do if the person who rejected your mother was now looking at you like redemption? He told himself it was about legacy, about image, but deep down, it was always about fear. 17 years ago, Vincent Hale stood in the middle of his private garden, holding a tiny silver necklace between trembling fingers. His daughter, Caroline, stood across from him. Belly swollen with life, eyes swollen from tears. "You're making a mistake," he had said, voice cold. Caroline didn't flinch. "No, Dad. You did. The moment you decided that skin color matters more than character." Vincent's grip tightened. "He's not from our world. You'll be isolated, disrespected. You'll raise a child who'll never belong in either." Caroline shook her head slowly. "She'll belong to me, and that's enough." He wanted to scream, to beg, to reason, but instead he gave her one last thing. "The necklace. I had this made for you," he said quietly, "for when you became a mother." Caroline stared at it, then looked at him, hurt flickering in her eyes. "Don't give me something beautiful, and then take everything else away." She left that day. It was the last time he ever saw her alive. After her death, Vincent asked the hospital to place the necklace in her casket. But the nurse, Laverne Washington, knew better. She had seen the fear in Caroline's eyes before the birth, the sadness, and when the baby miraculously survived. Laverne made a choice. She kept the necklace. And one day, when the girl was old enough, she passed it on. Back in the present, Arielle stood in front of the public records office. The papers in her hand were trembling. Birth certificate, death certificate, guardian transfer form. She saw it in black and white. Mother, Carolyn Hale. Father, Jonathan Brooks. Place of birth, New York Presbyterian Hospital. Next of kin, refused to claim. Next of kin, Vincent Hale. Her fingers curled into a fist. He knew. He had always known. Back in his office, Vincent watched an old video on loop. It was grainy, low quality, but it was her, Caroline, age 14, standing at the balcony, singing off-key into a hairbrush, laughing. That laugh! He closed the laptop. He couldn't bear it. He had failed her daughter, failed himself. Later that night, as the wind howled outside his glass windows, a knock interrupted the silence. Diane Weller entered, holding a wooden box. "What's that?" he asked. "Your daughter's things. I kept them, in case." She placed the box down. Vincent opened it slowly. Inside, a journal with Caroline's handwriting. A photo of her with Jonathan. A tiny hospital bracelet marked Arielle. He picked it up with trembling fingers. The weight of it, so small but unbearable. Meanwhile, Arielle sat across from Laverne at the kitchen table, voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me?" Laverne sighed. "Because you deserve to grow up being loved, not labeled." "Then why now?" "Because he came back." Laverne reached into the drawer and pulled out an old photo. A younger Vincent, formal, intimidating, standing beside a teenage Caroline. "He didn't just reject your mom, Arielle," she whispered. "He buried her before she even died. And now the girl he buried in silence had returned, wearing her mother's face and her necklace. If the truth sat in a wooden box for 17 years, would you be brave enough to open it? You can't rewrite the past. But sometimes you can read it out loud, to the person who deserves to know. The next morning, the diner buzzed with its usual clatter. Coffee cups, eggs on the grill, someone arguing with a jukebox that had given up on life. But Arielle wasn't behind the counter. She was standing across the street, coat zipped up to her chin, watching, waiting. And just like before, at 9:42 a.m., the black Mercedes pulled up. Vincent Hale stepped out. Same coat, same silence, but his eyes looked older, worn. He didn't even notice her until she crossed the street and stood in front of him. "Arielle," he said, startled. "I know who you are," she said softly, "and I know who I am." He didn't speak. She held out a folder. Documents, photos, a copy of her birth certificate, the photo of Caroline and Jonathan. "Why didn't you claim me?" she asked. Vincent's mouth opened, then closed again. His voice was barely audible. "Because I didn't deserve to." They sat inside the diner in the farthest booth. Ironic, she thought, how power always tries to hide when it's broken. Vincent stared down at his coffee, untouched. "I was scared," he said finally. "I told myself it was about protecting you, that you wouldn't be accepted in my world, that I was doing you a favor by staying away." Arielle raised an eyebrow. "But really," he looked up, "really, I was ashamed. Of myself, of how I treated your mother, and I thought if I never saw you, I wouldn't have to face it." Arielle's throat tightened. "She died thinking you hated her." Vincent closed his eyes. "I know." Silence. Heavy, alive. Arielle took a deep breath. "I used to dream about who my family was," she said. "Made up stories. A brave mom. A dad who was a soldier. Grandparents who couldn't find me because of some accident." She gave a sad smile. "But none of the stories ended with the truth being buried." Vincent looked at her, really looked. "You deserved better," he said. She nodded. "I still do." He reached into his coat and pulled out the wooden box Diane had returned, pushed it gently across the table. Inside, Caroline's journal, the hospital bracelet, a photo of her holding a newborn baby, barely awake. Arielle stared at it. Tears welled. "She named me," she whispered. "She loved you," Vincent said. "So much, even when I didn't." They sat like that, for minutes, maybe more. No one spoke. There was too much inside the silence. Eventually, Arielle stood. "I don't know what this makes us," she said quietly, "but I'm not your secret. Not anymore." Vincent looked at her with something between grief and awe. "No," he said, "you never were." She turned to leave, but then paused. "Do you want to walk with me?" she asked. Vincent blinked. "Now?" Arielle shrugged. "I'm off shift, and there's a lake nearby. My mom used to love lakes." His breath caught. "Yes," he said. He stood up slower than usual. Outside, the wind had softened. As they walked towards the lake, side by side, strangers stared. A young black girl, an old white billionaire. No one knew what they were to each other. But maybe, neither did they. Yet, forgiveness doesn't always come as a word. Sometimes it's just a walk, shared by two people learning how to carry the same weight. But not everyone was ready to let Vincent Hale rewrite his legacy. Someone had been watching, and they had their own version of the past, one they weren't done with. If truth knocks at your door, would you open it or pretend no one's home? The truth may set you free, but first it will make you bleed. The lake shimmered with soft morning light. Arielle skipped a stone across the water, its ripples breaking the perfect reflection of sky and silence. Vincent sat on the bench behind her, quietly watching. His cane rested by his side, but his posture seemed lighter somehow. Like a burden had shifted. Not gone, but shared. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about stocks, mergers, or the boardroom. He was thinking about laughter. Caroline's laughter, Arielle's smile. It was fragile, but it was hope, until a voice shattered it. "Well, I'll be damned. Vincent Hale, strolling through a public park, with a black girl on his arm." Vincent turned slowly. The man standing near the railing wore an expensive suit and a smirk that had sliced more throats than knives ever could. Thomas Granger, board member, old friend, and one of the few who still called Vincent by his full name like a dare. Arielle looked confused. Vincent stood. "This isn't your business, Thomas," he said calmly. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Oh, but it is. You think you can just waltz back into public life with her?" He turned to Arielle. "You know who he is, right? What he stood for?" Arielle stepped closer. "I know exactly who he is." "Do you?" Thomas snapped. "Because this man once donated to foundations that kept kids like you out of our schools. He made speeches about bloodlines and legacy. And now what? You're some redemption project?" Vincent's fists clenched, but Arielle put a hand on his arm. She stepped forward. "I'm not a project," she said, voice sharp. "And he doesn't get to erase the past, but neither do you." Thomas scoffed. "You really think the world's going to accept this fairy tale? Black girl forgives racist billionaire? That's not justice, that's PR." Vincent took a deep breath. "No," he said. "It's family." Later that day, photos of the encounter surfaced online. Vincent Hale's secret granddaughter? From corporate racism to family reunion? America's coldest CEO finally melts? The comments came fast. Some supportive, some venomous. Arielle scrolled through them that night. "She's a fool. He's playing her." Finally some humanity. "That necklace, though, same one his daughter used to wear? I hope it's real, but I doubt it." Her phone buzzed non-stop. School friends, journalists, strangers. She tossed it onto the bed. She wanted quiet, but the truth had a sound. And now everyone was listening. At the penthouse, Vincent sat in his office, staring at the screen. An email from the board. Subject: clarification request. Family ties and public perception. He closed the laptop. His hands shook slightly, but not from fear. He looked at the wall across from him. Caroline's portrait had just been hung. Right below it, a space waited. He smiled faintly. That night, Arielle knocked on his door. Vincent opened it, surprised. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated. "Not really." He stepped aside. "Let her in." "I don't want to be a symbol," she said. "Or a tool, or a headline." He nodded. "You're not. I just want to know who I am." "You're Arielle," he said, And you're mine. She looked at him for a long time. I haven't decided yet if I want to be. Because forgiveness is not a gift. It's a choice. And some choices take time. But Vincent still had one more truth to share. One final piece from the past. That Arielle had never seen. And it was time. What would you do if the whole world watched your forgiveness and called it fake? Some truths don't come in courtroom confessions. They come in paper folds and voices that never made it home. 2 days after the headlines broke, Vincent sat quietly at his desk, holding a sealed envelope in his hands. The edges were frayed, yellowing. The handwriting on the front soft, feminine, slightly uneven, like it was written in a rush. To my daughter, if she survives, if she ever asks. The nurse, Laverne, had kept it all these years. Never mailed it, never burned it, just waited. And now she had passed it to him. That evening, Arielle returned. She didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. Vincent opened the door to find her standing with her arms folded, face unreadable. "I'm not here to forgive you," she said. "I know. But I'm here to listen." Vincent nodded slowly, motioning her inside. He handed her the envelope. "This was written the day you were born," he said. "By your mother. I never knew it existed." Arielle took it with both hands, sat down, and opened it. The letter was short, but it stopped time. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. And it means your grandfather did not come. That's okay. I forgive him. But please, don't let anger grow where love could have. You are more than blood. You are choice. You are love. And if one day you meet the man who raised me, tell him I still remember how he hummed when making pancakes. Tell him I loved him, even when it hurt." "Mom." Arielle wiped her cheek silently. Vincent didn't move, didn't speak. Finally, she looked up. "Did you really hum while making pancakes?" He blinked, then laughed, just a little. "Yes, badly." She smiled. "A real one." Later, they sat on the balcony. Not saying much. The air between them had changed. Not erased, but softened. Like an old scar that no longer ached in the rain. Arielle stood to leave, but paused. "I start college next fall," she said. "Pre-med." Vincent looked at her, surprised. "Will you let me help?" he asked carefully. "With tuition?" "No," she said, looking at him. "With pancakes." He smiled, choked up. "I'd like that." As she walked toward the elevator, Vincent's voice called out behind her, "Carolyn would be proud." Arielle didn't turn back, but her voice carried down the hallway like a promise. "I hope so." Final cinematic image. Vincent stands alone on the balcony, above the city he once ruled, not with a briefcase, not with a contract, but with a small folded letter in one hand and the necklace in the other. And for the first time, he doesn't feel alone. Some people leave us with a scar, others leave us with a map, and some leave us both. If you had one letter, one moment, one chance, would you choose forgiveness or closure?